Unfortunately, some of our incredible Iraqi allies may not have a chance to see this webinar live, and so we want to make sure they have the chance. So, just for everyone on the call to be aware that that is happening. This webinar, quite frankly, is long overdue. I think, No One Left Behind has gotten a reputation as an Afghanistan-focused organization, and for good reason. I'm very proud of the work we've done supporting America's Afghan allies, really since 2021, and probably shortly before that has been the priority of effort for the U.S. government when it comes to supporting our wartime allies, and it's been the priority of effort for No One Left Behind, because quite frankly, that's where visas were available, and that was, the programs that were actually functioning. We're supporting Afghan allies. But that is not, explicitly or, singularly what we focus on. We really believe that we have an obligation to any local nationals that served on behalf of America's troops, diplomats, or intelligence community professionals. And so Iraq has been an incredibly important place for America. It remains an important place. I think people don't realize that we still have troops in Iraq and are likely to still have troops through at least September of 2026. It's a place that's incredibly important to me as well. I was honored to serve in Iraq twice. My first deployment was in Maysan province, which is in the south and east and borders Iran. My second deployment was um, in Anbar province, and I was honored. I was the last unit that left Anbar province in 2011, and we road marched all the way from Western Anbar in Al Asad Air Base down to Kuwait. And it was an incredible time because I looked at how much the country had progressed since my first deployment and how much safer it was, and I was really hopeful. And then, quite frankly, within 3 years, ISIS had taken that base and controlled nearly a third of the country. So it's an area that is, quite frankly, oftentimes volatile, and nobody knows that more than our wartime allies that live there. So this is long overdue for us to discuss kind of what is the status of U.S. forces in Iraq, what is the outlook going forward, and then what are the mechanisms that our Iraqi allies can avail themselves of to seek safety in the U.S. And so, honored to be joined by two of my favorite Iraqi people, Noor and Azad. And I'll now turn it over to Azad, who's far more interesting than I am. Mike, to you, buddy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We appreciate your time, really. My name is Azad Sleigher. I was born and raised in Iraq. I grew up in the north in a city called Kirkuk. It's known for the ninth largest oil field in the world, so you can understand how much conflict can happen there. Graduated high school in 2014, and that's when the second basically battle started in Iraq when ISIS starting coming over from the west through Syria, and that's when I finished high school, went to college for 2 semesters, and I started applying to be a translator. I went through a extensive background check, medical check, language test, and I was hired on as a translator, combat translator slash cultural advisor. I worked with Special Operation Forces, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Marine special teams for 3 years. I basically my job was to help build that bridge between the U.S. Special Operations and the Iraqi National Forces to fight against ISIS in Mosul, which is the second largest city in Iraq. As you heard, Andrew mentioned that the first withdrawal of the U.S. forces was in 2011. So going back to that time, Operation Iraqi Freedom, when the U.S. military pulled out in 2011 and they came back again in 2014, the mission changed. It was advise and assist. It was Operation Inherent Resolve. And the reason I mentioned that is because it had a very high impact on the special immigrant visa for Iraqis. Going through the process myself firsthand, I experienced all the challenges and the obstacles along the way. What really inspired me, I'll take a step back. Growing up in Iraq in Kirkuk during 2007 and 8, it as a high schooler, I saw a lot of Marines and Army soldiers patrolling across the my neighborhood in the city, and that's really what inspired me. Looking at those Marines and soldiers and all U.S. service members in general is, okay, that's what I want to be. I was really intrigued and inspired to practice my own English, learn my own English, become a translator ultimately, and just get myself out of Iraq. So, pushing forward, when I became a translator, going through my time with special operations, I really um, learned a lot. And that's when I also realized when I go to the US, I want to be a US service member. I want to join the Marines and be a Marine infantryman. In 2019, I can say I was lucky that I was with a very special team that helped me put a request to get to a commanding general to get me a signed recommendation letter because the SIV program had changed, the qualifications had changed. Now, in order for you to qualify, there's multiple steps. You have to go through a counterintelligence screening, and then a U.S. general has to sign a letter for you to qualify. So, lucky enough, and I worked really hard for it. The team trusted me. I got the letter, I got out by myself in 2019. I immigrated to the US. I lived in North Carolina, and that's when No One Left Behind reached out and asked, "Hey, you're one of two people in Iraq that got out on an SIV. How'd you do that? We would like you to come on board and explain the process, strengthen the program." And that's when I got involved with No One Left Behind, and it potentially became an Iraqi ambassador. I talked to a lot of people, talked to the State Department, um, of what we can do better to change or make the Iraqi SIV program stronger. And then following that, was preparing to join the Marine Corps. So I ended up joining the Marines as an infantryman, served 4 years in the Marines with 1st Battalion, 4th Marines in Camp Pendleton. I got out last year and am currently doing my master's degree in cybersecurity engineering, at the same time involved with No One Left Behind. And to give you my experience firsthand, I still have family members that live in Iraq. As much as all the story sounds great, there's also a lot of challenges that the Iraqis are facing. And with your help and with No One Left Behind, we're constantly doing our best to um, try to get the next person out. I have had incredible people at No One Left Behind help me and help a lot of applicants, but also on a personal level, I've helped people navigate through the Iraqi SIV. I would sit down and get on FaceTime outside of work and just help people fill out the paperwork. Okay, we need to, well, they tell me I don't have a letter from a general. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go through all your recommendation letters. We're going to find the lieutenant colonel that wrote you a support letter. We're going to reach out to him through LinkedIn. When I was active duty, some people would reach out to me and say, "Hey, you're a Marine now. A Marine wrote this letter for me. Can you reach out to this person?" And I would use and this happened actually. I got two people out of Iraq and they lived with me. Because I went through my channel in the Marine Corps as a Marine and I just connected the dots. But these are just people that we're in touch with, that we're closely supporting, like an average person that would go online and try to fill out the application themselves. It's very challenging, especially getting that letter from the general. But yeah, overall, that's my story, and I'll be happy to share any questions you guys might have.
Azad, a quick question on my end. I think you have been on both sides, and I would love for you to, expand a little bit on what was it, how did you feel in terms of both, safety and obligation to the U.S. mission when you were in your interpreter role? And also maybe expand on how did you feel being on the other side as a U.S. Marine and the importance of having these local nationals support who happen to be all, essentially what did you learn from that dynamic? Any perspective you've gained being on the other side, on either sides, to be honest with you.
Definitely. So, being a combat translator, working with special operations really helped me understand that the mission was bigger than myself. I wasn't just a translator that would talk to a general, an Iraqi general in a meeting or translate logistics. It was more of, okay, this mission is bigger than myself. I saw from my lens as an interpreter, what I saw is that, okay, going to the US, becoming a US Marine gave me the opportunity to see through as an American soldier as well. Being involved within that community helped me understand that a lot of the information and a lot of the words were not really conveyed properly. Some people here in the United States didn't have much knowledge and experience, not to their own fault, because it wasn't really available for them to understand. I definitely went through a lot of challenges. During my time as a translator, I faced, well, I translated for 3 years. I would only go home twice a year. And what would happen, the team would arrange a helicopter ride for me out of the base to the big airport, northern Iraq, and I would get out of the airport, and that's where my family would meet me. And just the whole process of the amount of risk that I went through and my family went through was incredible. And coming to the US, going through the Marine Corps pipeline, when I was in boot camp, I every time there was a camera around to take pictures, my drill instructors would put me to the side and basically hide me because they didn't want my information online because I still had family there. And that just made me realize more that I was lucky enough to make it out and that there's still people in Iraq facing those challenges and threats that we can't move fast enough to help them and get them out.
Um, that is an incredible kind of perspective that not a lot of us have, to have been on both sides in such a short time. I'd like to cue Andy in here, and for him to talk a little bit about his experience as an Army officer operating in Iraq, and the support he's received, and essentially from the Iraqi nationals that served alongside him.
Yeah, thank you so much, Noor. Firstly, just one house cleaning thing. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A at any point. We can start receiving them now because I want to make sure that we're answering any kind of lingering questions. Second thing, and this is a shameless plug, but Steve Miska is a former senior advisor to No One Left Behind. He's also a retired Army officer, had served in a brigade that I had served in, just a really great American. He wrote a book called Baghdad Underground Railroad, Saving American Allies in Iraq. I really recommend it if you're looking for, what are some of the risks that face our allies. And I may actually press on Azad to share more about kind of his specific story because he has an incredible one that I want him to share. But if you're looking for a great book that kind of details the risk to allies, that's one that I would recommend. Um, for me as a infantry platoon leader in my first deployment, our interpreters were invaluable. I'm embarrassed to say that I took Arabic for 3 years in college, and it was a danger to myself and others. Had no real Arabic skills at all, despite my best efforts in college, and so really had to rely on my interpreters to do anything, quite frankly. So much of what we do in the Army and in the military generally is it's interacting with the local populations. It's interacting with the local militaries there. And so we would coordinate operations between ourselves and the Iraqi police, ourselves and the Iraqi army, when we would be doing, counter IED or counter IDF patrols. So much of us trying to find, actionable intelligence and, target those networks that were attacking Americans involved us just talking to the local population. Without my interpreters, we would not be able to do that. They truly were invaluable, not just in directly translating from Arabic to English, but really understanding kind of cultural context, cultural clues, there were things that, yeah, we tried to train these things before we deployed, but really we didn't have a grasp of it. And I had to rely on my interpreters to tell me that, like, okay, this was said, but it really didn't mean what they said it meant. We were actually just joking on before everybody was let in. There's this idea of like, you ask an Iraqi like, hey, can we get this? And it's, inshallah. And that basically means like, no, man, it's not going to happen. But like, directly translates to God willing. And for me, there's it's just one kind of small example where, there's a cultural component to it that these local nationals are invaluable in translating to us. And so, helping me, I sometimes talk about managing the geometry of the battlefield. So when you're actually engaged in kinetic operations, you're in a firefight. A interpreter that's on the radio with the Iraq army or with the Iraqi police to make sure that there's not inadvertent fratricide. That's really important. But they're also really important in just helping, get to know the community so that they can provide us, intelligence, so we can action some of the terrorist networks that are attacking us. So, really incredibly important.
A- Andy, will you expand a little bit on the importance of Iraqi translators and the continuity of information? Because I know like units come in and out, and like they have been like that role is kind of like I feel as Azad was saying, he served for 3 consecutive years.
That's a great point. I oftentimes felt small in my service when I would talk to our Iraqi translators that, I got there in 2009. Some of these guys have been translating for us since 2004. And so, they had 5 years of constantly at war. And Azad had talked about like how he had to, quite frankly, like, sneak out to go on leave because there were overwhelming threats. For our interpreters, the war did not end. I mean, it was 365, 24/7, even when they're not on leave. And Noor, you bring up a great point, which is there's a continuity that we get from our interpreters. Our interpreters, actually, very few of them were from Mason province, quite frankly, because of the risk to them. They didn't want to actually work where their family lived. But they stayed and worked in Mason province for years. And so we had interpreters there that had been there since 2006 and had seen just kind of the massive shift in the security situation, had contacts in the Iraqi police and the Iraqi army, and knew kind of who were the power brokers within the region, knew who were some of the folks that couldn't be trusted. Really, really incredibly important. And that was stuff that they turned over to me as I came into the organization or came into the operating area. And then when we left, they were invaluable to the unit that replaced us, handing over those exact same kind of relationships. And so continuity is the perfect word for what they bring, North.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. And since we talked about risk, I want to segue back to Azad because I know he has got some interesting risky stories that he's experienced, serving alongside the U.S. With that. And, Azad, which one we're talking about. So I'll hand it over to you.
Um, Being a translator is very, very critical. You're a critical asset. The team counts on you. There are times where I'll give you an example. I sit between two individuals, an American general and an Iraqi officer, and the Iraqi might be a little frustrated of they might not have gotten what they may say something disrespectful or aggressive, and as the translator, you have to kind of channel that when you translate it, and to kind of maintain the level of risk and just not have things escalate. But I have a lot of examples and instances of threat, but one time was um, our I was on a small team, a small MARSOC team, Marine Special Operations, on a huge base. It got ran over. We were the only people that got left. Our cooks flee. Long story short, I received a phone call from one of the commanders, the local forces commanders, that wanted to essentially get some information out of me. And what I had to do is basically played really nicely to where he's not going to go and then chase my family and kill my family members. Like, hey, get on a phone call. We know you work here. We know who you are. We know what you do. Just for our logistical purposes, we would like you to let us know how many Americans are on that base, how many up armor trucks, how many guns, bullets, the whole nine yard. And I had to just play really innocent, like, sir, I have no idea what you're talking about. I am actually not a translator. I'm the guy that goes to the gate and picks up their trash, and throws the trash away. I don't have any access to the base. Like, just very, very small examples. And I can give you hundreds of times because I was a local national interpreter. This is before I became a U.S. citizen. Before I moved to the U.S., I had access to off base, and the amount of times I've left the base. I'm sure Andrew can understand that. You get off the base and you're the only person that leaves in and out of that base. And the amount of times I've been followed by vehicles that I've had to speed up or call someone to come change their vehicle with me. And yeah, just incredible. Like, your heart rate is above 120 constantly in that environment.
Thank you for sharing that, Azad. I want to turn now to Andy to kind of, bring us to, why are we here sharing all of these stories, and sharing all of the important impact Iraqi translators have had on the U.S. mission and the risk that they are facing. And what I mean is, why is this day, this moment, and this webinar important?
Yeah, thanks
Andy.
so much, Noor. And I think first what I'll do is I'll talk about what's going on with U.S. forces, and then I'll kind of dive into what's going on with the SIV programs. So firstly, with regard to what's happening in Iraq right now, in September of 2024, there was an agreement that was reached between the U.S. and Iraq where we are going to have a two-phase withdrawal of forces from Iraq. The first phase actually began right in September of 2024. It was hypothetically supposed to end in September of 2025, and that involved us moving forces out of the region. It was a total advise and assist mission. It's no longer, there's no combat forces, although oddly enough, there's plenty of combat still going on. And we were going to basically just fall in northern Iraq in one of the Kurdish controlled areas, and that was going to be the only place that we had U.S. forces out of. That actually is not that has not happened. We have withdrawn forces, but actually just a week ago, the Iraqi government agreed to allow 250 to 300 advisors to stay in Al-Assad and Western Anbar. There are still U.S. forces in Baghdad as well, but they're slowly starting to trickle out. Um, at the same time, we are going to leave some forces in Syria to counter ISIS. It is an incredibly dangerous region, especially in Syria. A lot of people think that the mission against ISIS has gone, it's finished, we've beaten them. That's not necessarily the case. Actually, in 2024, CENTCOM reported that it was double the amount of attacks in Syria by ISIS than in 2023. 2025 has been just as volatile. As you look at, the Syrian government fell, and al-Shara is the new president of Syria. It remains to be seen what will happen in Syria. And quite frankly, the porous border between Syria and Iraq mean that what happens in Syria, what happens in Iraq doesn't stay on, just that side of the border, that these things are all very much interrelated. When you talk about the threats to our interpreters, to our local national forces, and this is for both Syrian allies and Iraqi allies that work for us, it's not just a single threat. It's not just ISIS. When you look at, who are the folks that are opposed to the U.S. and therefore, would want to reprise against the local nationals that worked for us. It's not just ISIS. It's also Kataib Hezbollah, which is a Iranian-backed militia. It's Hezbollah. It is the Popular Mobilization Forces, which are a quasi-state force in Iraq that has links to Iran. Quite frankly, an American ally in Turkey has bombed areas of Iraqi Kurdistan that have a lot of U.S. former U.S. interpreters in them. So when we look at the threats that's facing our local nationals, it remains incredibly high. And unfortunately, as we see U.S. troops withdraw from the area, and as we see all of the changes that have happened in both Iraq and Syria over the last, and quite frankly, the greater Middle East over the last 2 years, I worry that there are some vacuums and that malignant actors may have space to continue to rise and therefore reprise against our allies in both Iraq and Syria. Unfortunately, at the same time, there are very few pathways to come to the U.S. for our Iraqi allies. Um, Firstly, there are actually two SIV programs that support our Iraqi allies. The first is something called the 1244 SIV program. This was a SIV program that existed for Operation Iraqi Freedom. So that was the 2003 to 2011 timeframe when we were in Iraq. The way that that program works, I guess is technically correct. That program required that our Iraqi allies apply by September 30th, 2014 to be eligible for the program. So for folks like Azad that were instrumental in our fight against ISIS, because he did not work for a year prior to, when he had to apply for this program, which would have been September 30th, 2014, he was not eligible for it. That program continues, the Iraq 1244 program. It's still admitting Iraqis to the U.S., but it's taking over a decade. I mean, the fact that they had to apply by 2014 and they're still only now being admitted will tell you kind of how dysfunctional that program is. That program only has about 230 visas remaining for it. That's actually an uptick of 100 visas. One of the things that we did in November of last year, we spoke to the outgoing National Security Council and basically showed them that, quite frankly, their numbers were wrong between the quarterly reports on this Iraqi 1244 SIV program and monthly immigration statistics. And so they actually did an audit and found that there were 120 visas additional remaining for issuance. So there are now 230 visas remaining in this program. And so we still see, a handful of people every month come through on that program. The main way that our allies are being helped, though, and especially the ones that have been invaluable in the counter ISIS fight, so the more recent Iraq engagement, is through something called the 1059 SIV program. It's a program not just for Iraqis, but also for Afghans as well. This one has all its own kind of dysfunction. Firstly, it's an incredibly opaque program. Unlike the Afghan SIV program or the Iraq 1244 program, there are not quarterly reporting requirements out of the State Department. So we actually don't know how many people have pending applications. We don't know how long the applications take. As Azad had alluded to, it has different requirements from either the Iraq or Afghanistan SIV programs. It requires a general officer or the chief of mission from the State Department to sign off. I can tell you as an Army officer, it was really hard to get a general to sign anything, and that's as a company grade U.S. Army officer. As a local national, trying to have a general sign off on your letter of recommendation, incredibly tough. And so you have to be, one, just an incredible wartime ally for people to support that, but then also just lucky too. You have to be in proximity to general officers. I'll let Noor talk about this kind of going forward with some of the things that we're doing to support Iraqis, where we are trying to find them those letters of recommendation. But bottom line, it's very tough. The other very hard thing about the 1059 Iraq and Afghanistan SIV program, it's limited to 50 visas per year. So you also have to be lucky in being one of the 50 people that actually get the visa. Because of how limited it is, it cannot service all of the thousands of Iraqi local nationals that have interpreted for us over the last 10 years in the counter ISIS fight. So unfortunately, we're in a situation where the threat to our local nationals is multifaceted. It comes from, violent extremist organizations like ISIS. It comes from Iranian-backed militias. It remains to be seen what the government is going to look like. And so there's a lot of threat, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways that they can get here. Lastly, I would say the refugee program, there was a recent presidential determination just yesterday. It looks like there will only be 7,500 refugees admitted as a ceiling in 2026. Priority is not going to go to our Iraqi or Afghan allies. In fact, there's another program that exists, which is called the Iraq P2 Direct Access Program. It's a way that a lot of our Iraqi allies had tried to come to the U.S. That program had been paused in the Biden administration. It had been restarted then later on in the Biden administration, and it is incredibly doubtful that any of those folks, because it is part of the U.S. refugee admissions program, will come to the U.S. And so we're unfortunately in a position right now where only about 50 principal applicants, so 50 people that work for the U.S. and then their immediate family will be able to come at maximum in the next year. So that's unfortunately where we are.
Andy, will you speak very briefly on the importance of fulfilling the promise to our Iraqi allies beyond danger?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, we have a moral obligation to them. I think there's no doubt about that. The interpreters, the other local nationals that work for us, truly become part of the platoon, part of the unit. We see them as our brothers and sisters in arms. So there is, without question, a moral obligation because we've promised them. It's important to veterans like myself because, as I mentioned, they're part of our platoon. It feels, there's a moral injury when you don't, keep your word and you let guys and gals that fought beside you, when you let them down. But I think there's also a really important national security component to it. America is abroad right now. We're going to go abroad again. When we do, it will be incredibly important that we have local nationals that work on our behalf. I talk a lot about the global war on terrorism, and I think people think that that was just Iraq and Afghanistan. It wasn't. It relied on us having local national interpreters and other local nationals that supported us everywhere from the Philippines, because we helped the Filipinos fight ISIS in the Philippines, to Mali, to Yemen, to Somalia, throughout the Sahel. There are so many places where we have gone abroad and required local nationals to support our operations. That's going to be the way that war is going to be continued to fought, and undoubtedly, that's what it's going to look like in the future. And I worry that if we can't keep our promise to Iraqis, or to Afghans, or to Syrians, then when the U.S. goes abroad again, we will not have local nationals that want to stand with us because we can't be trusted. And so, for me, there's a very real national security component of it where I hope that the next, Lieutenant Sullivan or Captain Sullivan is going to have the incredible Iraqis and Afghans that I did that helped me complete the mission. But I worry that if we fail now, we just won't because we can't be trusted.
Thank you, Andy. And to kind of segue into some programmatic efforts that we have, the steps that we've taken to respond to the changing posture, which we've anticipated in the summer of 2024, our evacuation and resettlement departments both, put together a contingency plan that included, I think the most important one was a survey that was led by our advocacy department. Which I am sure we will drop here in the chat at some point for all of you to take a look at as well. If you're an Iraqi ally attending this call, please fill it out. Let us know as much as possible. Anything that you feel like would be important for us to know about your case. The most important thing I think we did is understand if our internal intake process matches, Iraqi SIV applications. So we've built an entire new database to intake, Iraqi forms that are relevant to the process. We've also expanded our pro bono legal case support team. We have an incredible, law firm that helps us, a fully learner, that helps us essentially look at these cases on a very, would say, detailed, individualized level, and figure out where the obstacles are in the process. We've also are looking at novel ways to approach, as Andy was mentioning, it's very difficult for, Iraqis to acquire the letters that they need to get the process moving. So we are looking internally. I think a big step we've taken, our incredible senior advisors have worked a partnership with us with LinkedIn, where we receive free codes from LinkedIn Premium. What we have done is we found that there's more success if the applicants have LinkedIn Premiums and can reach to their officers via that subscription. And we're also working on ways to see if we can augment their voices in specific cases where we know the process is far enough by utilizing our senior advisors to write those letters on their behalf, to maybe hope that there would be more success in having somebody from our board reaching out to specific officers to get the letters. And lastly, we have tested our internal systems on flying. We've flown tens of Iraqi SIVs, both to figure out if we can scale this on moment's notice, and take more I would say flights from Iraq, and generally understand what are the obstacles when they fly and how are their needs different from our Afghan allies. And we've also expanded our ambassador program. So we have another Iraqi ambassador. Thank you so much, Azad, for helping us throughout that process. So from a programmatic effort, we've really tried to test out our system to make sure that if a situation unfolds in Iraq at a large scale, would no one left behind be able to step in and evacuate or fly as many Iraqi SIVs as possible. And I may be biased, but I feel like, with the way we have handled last year with flying Afghan partners, I feel like we are ready to respond to a similar situation from an operational perspective, but we are hoping that it doesn't get to that point. And Andy, I'll kick it off to you here.
Yeah, just one data point that I wanted to share, Noor, because I think you did a good job talking about the flights program. Um, we have done over 3,100 flights, evacuation flights, to the U.S. so far this year. The overwhelming percentage of that have been Afghans. However, it's terrible that I don't have the figure top of mind right now. Somewhere between 30 or 40 of the 3,100 have been Iraqis. That's been a function of, quite frankly, there are just fewer visas coming through. But one interesting data point is between February and May, we flew 51% of all Iraqis that received visas came through No One Left Behind to come to the U.S. I am confident that number has gone up since, because quite frankly, No One Left Behind just wasn't as well known amongst our Iraqi allies as it was amongst our Afghan allies, because of the great work of Azad and Mohammed. Like, that is changing. So I know that number has gone up. Unfortunately, we stopped getting the monthly immigration statistics. They stopped being published as of May 31st. So I can't prove it yet, but I am confident that we are supporting well above half of the Iraqi SIVs that receive their visas, fly to the U.S. and are resettled through our efforts. And so incredibly proud of that. And, our goal is to make sure that the SIV program functions better so that there are more visas so we can continue supporting Iraqis at a greater volume.
Thank you, Andy. I think the number is 44, but I need to double check on that. I would love to turn around and open it to a Q&A in a second. I know that there's some questions already in the works, but before I do so, and our incredible team will drop the full email here, but if you are an Iraqi SIV or you're an advocate of, on behalf of Iraqi SIV, if you have any information that are helpful for us, please send an email to our VOC inbox. You can address it to me, Andy, Azad, whomever you want, all of us. But that inbox is something we monitor very seriously, and it will come our way, and we would love to engage with you. I want to take a moment really quickly to look at for Andy and Azad for anything that they want to address or talk about before I open the questions.
I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time. We still have a lot of people out there that need our help. We're here in America enjoying life. We have people that were a really big part of our mission, important assets to us, allies, people that helped us throughout the battlefield. And whatever you can do, whether it's donate, advocate, put our name out there, it would help us incredibly. And thank you very much.
I'm good. I'd love to just jump into the Q&A. I think we see a couple there. Nor, are you seeing them? If not, I can queue those up.
Sorry, I am not seeing them, but I will be looking for them while you queue them up.
Perfect. The first one is from Rebecca. Thank you so much for this. Her question, in case folks can't see it, I'll just read it, is thank you so much for putting this webinar together. Besides contributing money to your organization, how else can we help to move your goals forward? Does contacting U.S. representatives or senators make a difference? I live outside the U.S. Are there any tasks that I could volunteer for? The short answer is absolutely. We certainly, firstly, thank you for your financial assistance to No One Left Behind. But there are a ton of ways that you can still get involved. Advocacy is incredibly important. Peter, if you could, can you drop in the Partners in the Promise sign up link there as well so that she can sign up for that? So, Partners in the Promise is something we do through it's not part of our regular cadence of outreach from No One Left Behind. It's very much an advocacy focused newsletter that is led by Sonia from our team. And it's much more in the weeds on policy. It's also much more detailed and up to date on what's happening in Congress right now. When is there an actionable thing that you can assist with? Bottom line is yes, reaching out to your representatives or senators is incredibly important, especially if they are GOP representatives or senators right now. Just generally speaking, the party that's in the majority is usually the most important one. And so, yes, talking about this issue with your representatives, incredibly important. Signing up for Partners in the Promise so you can kind of get updates on where we are in the legislative calendar. What is an ask of your legislator that is ripe right now? That is one of the best ways. And quite frankly, we're always looking for people that are willing to draft op-eds or write in their local paper about why this is important. And then for any other tasks, we can always use volunteers to help with evacuation. So we can drop that link as well to sign up as a volunteer.
Thank you, Andy. I know I've already answered this question, but I feel like I would love to revisit it again. It's from our senior advisor, Nell. Nell is asking, this is so important. I cannot agree more. What can we do to help? And I'll kick it off to Azad again, because I know he just went over and answered this again, but I would love to hear him say it one more time.
Really, I spoke to the Officer of Inspector General, State Department in 2019 when I immigrated here, when No Left Behind reached out to me. And I sat down with a lot of people in a room and I explained to them really, um, however we can do this, however we can get the message out, if we can change the qualifications, the requirements to be eligible and qualify for the SIV program, that would incredibly help us. Like if we can drop the chief of mission requirement, because let's be honest, I know people, I know hundreds of interpreters that I'm in touch with that did not have the chance to work with special teams to be out in the battlefield. They were interpreters on base at the gate, logistic work, admin work. They had no access to generals, and they honestly will never. So how can we help those people? Is if we can push and advocate as much as possible to drop that one requirement. You don't need a recommendation letter from a 1 star and up. It can be anything below a full bird. We can easily get to those people. That is my biggest thing that that I'm really pushing for.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of hammer on what Azad said, unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where there are just not enough visas available for our Iraqi allies, and so where the greatest help that we could use right now is just an advocacy to change that, to reform the program, to make it a more functional program. Um, and quite frankly, that's going to take folks reaching out to their legislators. Ultimately, reforming the program is not something that can be done at the executive, anyways. It's something that has to happen through Congress updating the program. Also, one thing I think it may have been answered privately, but if not, for my team, can we? I think Wahid had asked a question about it was a case specific question. Can we share the email address where folks that can reach out to us on case-specific questions so that we can help them if they're having issues trying to get I believe he was looking for a signature from a general officer. Let's make sure we drop that in there as well. Oh, I see it in there. VOC@NoOneLeft.org. So for any kind of case-specific questions, we would love to have you reach out to us at VOC at NoOneLeft.org. That'll be the best way that we can help with those specific questions and see if we can't find a general officer to sign off on letters of recommendation. And quite frankly, it can happen really pretty quickly. One just short anecdote, we had somebody that reached out to us. He had a number of letters of recommendation, one from a captain, one from a major, one from a lieutenant colonel, and then one that was unsigned from a Marine two-star general. And very quickly I looked up who this general was. I didn't know him, but I reached out to our senior advisor, General Petraeus, and within an hour and a half, he had connected me with General Stone, a two-star from the Marine Corps, and within 3 hours, we had a signed letter of recommendation for him. So results will vary. I can't guarantee that for everyone that's seeking a letter of recommendation, but we have been able to move the ball forward on stuff like that. So please feel free to reach out to that VOC at NoOneLeft.org.
And I promise we are monitoring that inbox and responding to it, not in what Andy was saying early on the inshallah Iraqi way, but in a real urgent way. Speaking of which, I know we're wrapping up some questions. I don't see any questions in the panel, and as an Iraqi who can't help themselves, I am going to cue Andy to his favorite interpreter story that left I would say a taste in his mouth.
Okay, so I would say my favorite one, if we're looking for my favorite Iraq one, uh, one of my interpreters, I was very brand new. It was my first deployment. I was a platoon leader, and I was very much trying to see myself as this Lawrence in Arabia figure that was liked and respected by my Iraqi police and Iraqi army counterparts. And so my interpreter, kind of goaded me on there. They wanted to have a cigarette with me while we were drinking tea, and I don't smoke. And he managed to goad me into smoking 3 cigarettes with this Iraqi police the police captain that I was with, and then I was green and barely made it back to the truck before getting sick. So that was an example of my interpreter trying to help me to connect with the Iraqi policeman, but at my own detriment there.
Sorry, Andy. On behalf.
Thank you. I appreciate you apologizing on behalf of the Iraqis.
I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes to see if we get any more questions. I'll take the opportunity to ask Azad again. He was recently, promised me to bring me a gift in Iraq. I am still waiting for that gift, so I just want some witnesses on a recorded line. He's given me an Iraqi promise.
Inshallah, you'll have it when I see you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I don't see any more questions. I would love to kind of reaffirm our commitment to our Iraqi allies and Afghan allies as well, and all partners who've served alongside the U.S. mission in some in some way. I'd like to remind everybody to take a look at the chat. We do have the survey. It is incredibly important and beneficial to us anytime we get any information. And the other thing is the VOC inbox. Please reach out to us if you have any case-specific information. If you have any anything that would help us, advance our process or help us improve our operations, we would love to hear from you. Before Andy, I think I see a question in the channel. I was going to turn it over to you and Azad for some final, maybe answer the question and some final.
Yeah, thank you much. So just to the anonymous attendee that had asked, if they can assist with adjusting, with helping families adjust that come to the U.S., that would be fantastic. I mean, so much of, for the 3,100 plus people that we've flown to the U.S., so much of their welcome has been, quite frankly, just folks that, wanted to get involved, everyday people that just wanted to help welcome recent arrivals. The ever-changing immigration landscape has, quite frankly, gutted in a lot of ways the reception and placement and the refugee resettlement agencies that historically welcomed both refugees and SIVs. And so we would love for you to get involved. Please feel free to reach out for folks that are looking at getting involved that way, not case-specific questions, but just wanting to get involved with No One Left Behind. Please reach out to info@nooneleft.org. And Peter, if you can drop that email address in the chat as well, that'd be great.
Awesome. Azad, I want to give you a couple of minutes for any final words on your end.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again. If you're unsure how to help us, so we do also help our Iraqi and Afghan allies resettle in the US. I personally live in the United States. If you don't know how to help us, please reach out to us. We could use any kinds of help. We have all kinds of families here that are recently coming into San Diego area. I personally go to synagogues, churches, mosques to collect donations for them. So if you have anything that you think can help someone that just arrived, please reach out to us and we would love to take anything from you. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you much, Mike. I did see one final question, which is welcome.us still a thing? The answer is yes. Welcome.us is still, it still exists. It's still trying to, cultivate a culture of welcome. And so they're still doing some great advocacy. They're good friends of ours. We meet with them regularly. In fact, I think we'll have some end of year programming together. We've done a bunch of webinars. So welcome.us is still a thing. However, the private sponsorship, private sponsorship, which had been, by name saying we would like to privately sponsor an SIV that's arriving. Also, private sponsorship of refugees through what they call the P4 refugee program. All of that is not a thing anymore. So the actual U.S. government-backed private sponsorship is not happening. However, quite frankly, a lot of the work that had been going on this year with resettlement had been informal private sponsorship, where these private sponsor groups that had planned on sponsoring people through the formal government process before it was shut down, they actually stepped up and informally, worked with No One Left Behind and received people and sponsored them anyways, albeit not through an official government program.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate your feedback. Thank you, everybody who has joined us. And thank you for the No One Left Behind staff who has been working tirelessly on supporting our, allies in Iraq and Afghanistan. Big shout out to our development and marketing and comms department for putting this together, and including me. They took a huge risk there, but hopefully, it paid off. And you can't mute yourself and laugh. I think everybody heard that laugh by just looking at you, but I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. We hope to have offered some value here and some helpful information. Please reach out to us if you have anything for us. We would love to help. And beyond that, I will kick it off to Andy since he left, for a couple of more words and wrap up. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thank you, Noor. Not much from me. I just appreciate everyone's time, appreciate everyone's continued support of No One Left Behind and the incredible Iraqi, Afghan, and other local nationals that we serve. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.